All right, let's just dive right into this. Welcome to an exploration of the unseen forces that are quietly shaping our reality. Have you ever wondered what if the basic facts you were taught about geography, global wealth, and power were actually just carefully constructed illusions? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on the hidden systems that dictate how our world actually operates.
So let's kick things off with something you've probably looked at 1,000 times. Is your world map a lie? I know, it's a pretty bold question, but just think about that map hanging in your old classroom, the one you see on the news all the time or in documentaries. You've probably trusted it since you were a kid, but what if it's actually been deceiving you this entire time?
I mean, it's wild when you look closely. On a standard map, Greenland and Africa look roughly the exact same size. The actual reality, Africa is literally 14 times larger than Greenland. 14 times! And you know, this isn't just some minor printing mistake, it's a massive psychological blunder that fundamentally alters our entire perception of space.
Which brings us to Section 1, the Great Map Deception, a 500-year-old illusion.
To really shatter your preconceived notions here, let's just look at some stark realities of scale. Africa is so overwhelmingly massive that you could fit the USA, China, and most of Europe inside it, all at the exact same time. In Greenland, that giant white block dominating the whole top of your map, it's really just the size of the Congo. Oh, and Alaska? Actually smaller than Libya.
So why on earth is this totally inaccurate map hanging everywhere? Well, the culprit is the Mercator projection, which was created way back in 1569. But here is the absolutely crucial point. It was never designed to teach geography. It was just an ingenious tool for 16th century sailors. See, for navigation, you need a map where a straight line represents a constant compass bearing. The trade-off for that? Land masses near the poles get drastically stretched out. It became the standard during European empire building, and honestly, we retain it today simply out of familiarity. Even though, we all have GPS right in our pockets.
And here's why this actually matters. This 500-year-old navigational trade-off silently conditioned the global population. It inadvertently creates a visual hierarchy. It artificially exaggerates the size and, psychologically, the power and relevance of Europe and Western nations. And at the exact same time, it shrinks the equator, diminishing the perceived resources and populations of those regions. The map literally shapes what we think about global power.
All right, moving on to Section 2, the dictator's economic miracle, economic transformations.
Take a look at these numbers for a second. We're often taught that democratic freedom is the absolute, unquestionable prerequisite for national success, right? But just look at these staggering before and after figures. South Korea went from roughly a $50 GDP per capita in 1961 to over $36,000 today. Singapore jumped from $516 in 1965 to over $90,000. Just let the sheer magnitude of those economic leaps sink in. How did they actually achieve this? Well, spoiler alert, it wasn't through elections. Let's zoom in on South Korea. Park Chung-hee executed a pretty ruthless blueprint starting in 1961. First step, he seized power via a military coup. Second, he literally arrested major businessmen, marched them through the streets with signs, and basically gave them a choice: invest in the state's vision or lose everything. Third, he forced all this capital into state-selected export machines, companies you definitely know today, like Samsung and Hyundai.
This leads us directly into Section 3, the brutal cost of success, the price of success.
The reality of how those explosive export targets were hit is incredibly harsh. South Korea's growth was built on absolutely extreme conditions. We're talking 14-hour daily shifts, very often worked by teenage girls. Labor rights were utterly crushed, political opposition was silenced by decree, and in some factories, workers were actually given amphetamine injections just to maintain that extreme level of productivity. We have to look at this impartially to understand the absolute, unvarnished reality of how this national wealth was forged.
Now, what about Singapore? Lee Kuan Yew built what was essentially a corporate state. He ran the country exactly like a strict CEO would run a company. He enforced English to attract foreign capital, maintained a zero-tolerance policy for corruption, which was so severe it actually led to a disgraced minister taking his own life, and he systematically bankrupted the political opposition. He transformed a vulnerable little island with literally zero natural resources into Asia's richest nation through absolute, pragmatic control.
The entire mindset behind this approach can really be summed up in one quote from him. "Between being loved and being feared, I have always believed Machiavelli was right." Let that anchor the reality here. Some of the world's most successful economic transformations explicitly abandoned democratic freedoms to achieve their unimaginable wealth.
Okay, let's shift gears completely. Section 4, Norway's Unbelievable Hidden Wealth,
unbelievable riches.
70 billion tons. Just wrap your head around that scale for a second. That is the unimaginable size of an underground discovery made in Norway back in 2023. And get this, it's not oil, it's not gas, it's phosphate rock.
Now you might be asking, okay, so what? What even is phosphate? Well, it's incredibly powerful. It's an essential mineral for global agriculture, fertilizers, literally the stuff that grows the food feeding the world's population. It's also a crucial component for solar panels and a core material for electric vehicle batteries. So this single discovery essentially makes Norway globally indispensable in the modern tech and agricultural sectors.
So how much is 70 billion tons of this stuff actually worth? Well, try $24 trillion.
To kind of ground that massive number in reality, let's put it this way. Norway's single phosphate discovery is roughly equal in value to the entirety of Saudi Arabia's remaining oil wealth. Literally overnight, Norway suddenly entered a completely new, untouchable category of global power.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Escaping the Resource Curse, Escaping the Trap.
So first things first, we need to talk about the resource curse. Have you heard of this? It's an economic paradox where nations with abundant natural resources actually end up with extreme elite corruption, stunted growth, and severely weakened democracy. Basically, the elite hoard all the wealth and the everyday people suffer. This is the tragic baseline fate of almost every resource-rich nation on Earth. So why not Norway?
Well, Norway completely defied this curse through some incredibly strict, deliberate steps. When they found oil in the North Sea decades ago, they didn't just immediately sell the rights off to foreign companies. First, they declared maritime sovereignty in 1963. Second, they built local state expertise by founding Equinor in 1972, making sure to keep all that crucial knowledge in-house. And third, they made the massive decision to channel all excess wealth into a sovereign pension fund in 1990.
But here's the real kicker. Their ultimate weapon is just sheer legal discipline. By law, the government can only spend 3% of the fund's returns annually. The other 97%, it is strictly saved and reinvested for future generations. Their fund is already worth around $1.5 trillion right now, and they absolutely refuse to squander a dime of it.
So, the big takeaway here? Norway's actual geopolitical superpower isn't the oil. And honestly, it isn't even the newly discovered phosphate. It's their restraint. They prove that extreme patience and strict institutions can defeat the greed that usually accompanies limitless resources. They are insanely powerful simply because they don't spend their money.
So from maps that quietly warp our view of the planet, to the brutal hidden realities behind economic miracles, to a nation wielding immense global power through sheer financial restraint, we've pulled back the curtain on a lot of hidden forces today. And it leaves us with a pretty lingering, provocative thought. What other systemic truths have you blindly accepted without really looking beneath the surface? Keep questioning things, keep exploring, and I'll see you in the next explainer.